Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad you are participating in our Unleashing Your Freedom to Be Summit. So who we have with us today is Jo Beth Young, and she kind of resides between Ireland and England off and on in her life. Welcome, Jo Beth. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you, Sheila. It's lovely to be here, and thank you for inviting me as well.
Really absolutely. Absolutely. So a little bit about Jo Beth is I want to, first of all, indicate how much she is she's a musician. She's like a singer-songwriter. She plays multiple instruments. She writes scores. She produces, and she's done all this wonderful stuff throughout her life. And we're not going to focus on that today, but I just want you to know that as we are going through our interview and her life and what she's been about, remember that in the midst of all that we're going to talk about, she's also been this incredible musician. And the other thing that she's done in her life that we're going to get into as well is she's had like a thriving alternative therapy practice for many years. And you'll understand how she's brought different things in that practice, but that's what she's also done. And the biggest part of our journey here today is really going to be, we're going to explore what it was like for her to search and find what spiritual truth was for her. That's been a theme driving her through her whole life. So without further ado on that, Jo Beth, why don't you tell us a little bit about what set the stage for you as a child and this quest for searching and understanding?
Thank you so much. Well, it's a long story, so I'm going to really try and solidify it here for you. So I would say I've always been a spiritual seeker. In my childhood, I went to a Church of England school. So I was very aware of Christian religion when I was very young, but my family was, I'd say, a lot more open-minded. My mum's family were involved in the spiritualist church. And living out in the country, it's always a bit pagan as well. You'll find that a lot out in the English countryside. So it's a real mix of philosophies and spiritual ideals. And I had a lot of challenges in my childhood. I always sang, and I found a refuge in singing. But I would say that those challenges, they led me to really seek what is the truth, why are we here? And where can we find the love and healing that we're craving, even at a young age.
So when did you leave home?
I left home at 15. I say left very lightly. I was actually really thrown from home for being extremely rebellious. I was still really a child. At that time, I was very, very young. And that has definitely had a major impact on me. And anyone listening that's been through that experience will know, that's a lot sometimes to configure in your life, especially as you're getting older. So yeah, I'm a rebellious natured person in general. I would absolutely say that. So that, it wasn't that bad. I never thought I was that bad, but it was, all things considered, and with my family's moral values, it wasn't on, so yeah, that was that.
You just didn't toe the line quite as much as they wanted you to, so there you went.
No. Yes, basically.
That's so important in understanding this journey, forever, from the very beginning, your soul was after something and you were going to find what that truth was for you, not what anybody else was telling you.
Yes, and actually that's a good point. I want to just say something, that my first memory was actually of running away from home, like at 3 years old, looking for home, and I was really adamant at 3 years old. I remember running off through the fields, trying to find this home, whatever it was. So that was a very profound sort of signpost to me to what my life would probably be about. Looking back now, right?
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah. I can just see this little 3-year-old running around searching for her home.
Yeah, through the fields,
Yeah, exactly. Well, so then let's move on to, you've left, home, and you've been kind of like on your journey. And let's talk a little bit about the different I want to call them modalities and teachings and stuff that you actually explored and then brought them into your business or practice. I guess that's a better way to say it, because it was always in this alternative therapy stuff. But I think it would just be really helpful for all of our viewers to know, kind of your journey and how you actually chose searching one thing, found stuff, brought that into your practice, then found something else. So it was a continual evolution of how you developed all the different things that you did in your practice. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so it was such a varied spiritual search in my past, so I'll run through it as succinctly as I can. Before, even when I was 15, I was into crystals. All of us did tarot cards and stuff like that when we were quite young. Probably did some things that really were, a bit scary looking back on it now. But it was when I was 18, a moment for me that was life-changing, was picking up a book on Buddhism and, really relating to it and thinking, this is how I've actually thought all along, and finally I've found something that resonates with that. So I spent, a lot of my 20s learning so many things, herbalism, crystal healing, folklore. I've always been obsessed with folklore and symbolism, goddesses, all this kind of thing. So I really, I was always on that path of trying everything, really experiencing it, trying to be discerning along the way. I didn't like everything that I learnt about. There was definitely areas that resonated more, and shamanism, druidism, things like that, really appealed to me. So I was actually at music college when I made the decision to become a full-time therapist. I had no intention originally. I thought I would, was leaving music college to do music, obviously. And I had an amazing experience with a bioenergy healer. And I had been very ill, during my 20s and my 30s. I had like a hat trick of immune disorders that turned out to be lupus. And I was suffering all kinds of terrible symptoms. And it was actually through a bioenergy healing that I found major relief from these symptoms. And I had some really major experiences. And I decided to train in that. And that really was the beginning, in a way, of me opening my first therapy business. And it incorporated, energy healing, bioenergy healing. And I was doing intuitive readings. And teaching people really about all kinds of things like space clearing. I even wrote a book on, how to clear space. So it was a varied practice, but they were all things that I had found had made a difference in my personal experience.
That's beautiful. And so you did not only like your energy healings and stuff like that, but then you also got into like retreats and stuff like that too. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, I got into retreats at that point, but it was actually after another major epiphany that I actually really started to hold retreats. So it was more sort of events and workshops at that point. But yes, I did do sound healing days. I did also angel card reading days, things like that, where I was training people to clear space as well. At that point.
Yeah. And then you had some stuff around, particularly the feminine and the woman, like in your Wildness rising. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so that was after I'd had a major epiphany in my life. So I'll explain a little bit about that. So I was doing my healing practice, and I was in the first few years of that when my life completely shattered and fell apart. And the best analogy that I can give for that is like every part of my life kind of just got destroyed at once. It was like having lots of crockery on the table, and that trick when you pull the tea cloth, except all the crockery goes with it. And it affected absolutely everything in my life. My marriage ended, I lost any income. I was very sick. And I, had a really bad issue going on with where I was going to live, with my music career, all kinds of stuff happening. So I was really left at one of the worst rock bottoms that you could possibly experience. I was also experiencing a lot of spiritual stuff that was very frightening, that I didn't understand. And this was a few years into my practice. So at this point, I thought something's gone wrong. You know, I'm doing all this work. Why is this happening? And what am I missing at this point? So it was during that time, and this is kind of important to say with where I go with my work next. So I kind of have to explain this bit. But at that point, I really realized that, you know, I must be stepping out of line here somewhere, because my life is not manifesting the results that you'd expect someone with my kind of practice to have. And I was very sick. I moved back to England, so my parents could actually take care of me. That's how ill I was. And I ended up in Glastonbury having a profound moment where I went to the Magdalene Chapel, and I knelt my head on actually the sort of the altar step of the chapel. And I was so broken at that point. I was so heartbroken and broken in my life that I just said, look, Lord, you know, I don't know how to drive this car. I was like, look, God, you know, I hadn't really, I think, ever called out to God before. And I just said, look, God, I don't know how to drive my life. I'm like a drunk in charge of the wheel of my life. And through all my best intentions, all my best learning, all my best wisdom, all my best practice, my life is falling apart and has fallen apart. And I just said, please take the keys to my life. You drive. That's actually what I said. It was like, you drive now.
That's beautiful.
You know?
Yeah.
And I'll do what you ask me to do, whatever you want me to do. And at that moment, when I sat up again, I had an amazing, what some people might call an awakening. And everything in me shifted. I felt absolutely loved. I felt like this complete epiphany of love through my body. I felt all my bitterness go, all my anxiety, all my, everything went at that point. It was like, I felt like a child who was just going to have to learn how to live again from this point. So that did affect my work, because my work changed a lot after that.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like it was really a dark night of the soul that had everything to do with everything about your life.
Yes.
And, you know, as you were doing this searching, you know, and you know, like the Buddhism, whatever it was at the time, and you would question, when we talked before, you said something about you kind of question, is this the right thing? Because inside you didn't feel like who you were on the outside, all these great healings and all this stuff you were bringing into people, but you know, your body didn't seem to be working. You just couldn't understand that. And so how did you justify for yourself that what you were doing was the right path for you at that time, even though inside you didn't feel like it?
That's a great question, because when I recovered from that experience and started to be functionable again, I believed I'd had an experience of non-duality, of absolute oneness. And it was a blissful experience. And I felt I found the truth here, you know. So I wanted to teach non-duality. I mean, that was a slow process. And I got advice from other non-duality teachers. And I also felt I really wanted to help women liberate themselves from these very indoctrinated states of being, and of having relationship or living. And this was all coming up for me at the time. Now, I had doubts about my energy healing work. I had doubts about certain things in the practice. But the reason why I continued and actually went back, because for some time I dropped all of it. You know, I have to make that clear. I didn't do it I took a break. I was really in this state of new understanding. And I was working in music at this time. Things were going well in music, but I was reticent to pick it back up. But every time I did, it had such a profound effect. I saw miracle healings. I saw people who had been told they were incurable, you know, come out of serious illness. I saw people's mental state change. I saw people who were suicidal come back to life and start to thrive. So every time I questioned what I was doing, I had these amazing results. So that's what I judged it by. I thought, well, if I'm providing a service that is initiating, and I want to stress this, I never thought it was me. I never thought I'm this amazing healer or something. I never thought that. I just thought the practice that I did facilitated some sort of healing, whether it happened for them alone. So that was my standard. My standard was the results are good. So regardless of my doubts, regardless of the little voice, and also, the advice I was getting at the time as well, which was, you're just blocked. That's why you're doubting yourself, is it's something to do with a past life, or it's something to do with this, that, and the other. So then you just doubt yourself even more and carry on, if that makes sense.
Yeah. You just need to clear yourself and it'll all work okay.
Exactly.
Because it was such a dichotomy, it sounds like, between what, this energy work and all the stuff that the practice can do, and all these people, you saw this great healing, you had all this thriving business, people were seeking you out. And yet inside, that isn't really what you felt like. That's what I'm hearing. It was like this. So there was like this, like, what's going on here? What's going on? I totally understand that.
Yes, totally like a little, and it wasn't, it wasn't enormous. It was just like a little grain of sand to begin with. It was just a little doubt. It was like, what is this? Why is this rubbing me all the time? And what is it that isn't sitting right here? And then it just sort of grew. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's so fascinating. There's one there's a couple of specific things I want you to talk about in this journey. And it was how, because what I also get from, the story, as you've told me about your life journey, is that things just appeared for you. It was almost like you were on this search and things would appear, just spontaneously on your quest, like, I need to know this, something would show up, or maybe something would just show up and teach you something different. And so you just always went with the flow of what that was going to be like for you. So tell me how you really met this bioenergy person, and what happened during that teaching with him, or that learning with him.
So when I was training in bioenergy, which was before I'd had this awakening experience, so this was right at the beginning of me doing my practice. When I met him, he was, a real master of bioenergy, and I was training with him. It was very extensive, and he was someone who'd, trained with Qigong masters in Asia. He'd had a remarkable dedication to his work and was very thorough and brilliant at what he did. And it was long days because he was extremely thorough. And I really loved that about his dedication and his gift. And we all felt very lucky to be training with him. But about halfway through the training, he disappeared and stopped the training. And we just wondered what on earth's going on. I think it was about a year long, of the training that we did. And in short, I tracked him down to his Qigong classes on a Tuesday. And he told me he'd found the Lord, that he had found Jesus, and that, he was just in this thing where he knew he was going to have to step out of his work to follow the Lord. Now, I was so shocked. I was horrified. I felt, I thought he'd lost his mind because of, personal things that were going on in his life. But he was completely on fire with this, and he sat in my car outside to tell me about it. And then he said, I'm going to pray for you. And it was pouring with rain. It's like an Irish evening. And he got out of the car, knelt down on the pavement in a pouring rain and prayed for me. And I was cringing inside. I was so resistant. I thought, this poor man actually has lost his mind. But I also felt, I think, slightly betrayed, because it's like, look, this is the way. To me, bioenergy was the way. It was like, well, how could you give this up? And he was so successful in his work. I think at the time they were going to make a film about him. So I had no idea why he'd want to walk away from all of this. It was so shocking to me.
Yeah. And now
so that was
brought you to that and was teaching you that, and all of a sudden he's telling you, no, it's not. That isn't.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally get the betrayal feeling. Like,
yes,
would you lead me to, and then tell me it's not okay? Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Oh, that's so fascinating. So I love the whole concept of how, I'm picking up that even at that time, as far as the Christian type teachings or whatever, even though you've been exposed to those, that's not something that you had embraced. It was really more, I want to call it from your mother's side, more the pagan type living of the English countryside. That was really where you believed, truth was for you, and that's what you were actually searching.
100%. I mean, I was all about nature, the universe, energy, oneness. I mean, I did, after I had that, breakdown, if you like, and went to that chapel, I did finally accept the word God. That was really hard for me to accept that word even properly. But after then, I embraced that word, but I could not embrace Christianity at all. I thought Jesus was a very wise man. I thought that he was like Buddha, someone that wrote incredible teachings. But no, I just thought it was an outdated, old-fashioned kind of crutch for people that were weak and hadn't found the truth.
Yeah, right, because you'd found truth. It sounds to me like every time that you had like a new experience or something new and was powerful and it helped you, it was like you're going, this is truth. And then it would be like the next thing, then this is true. So that was really, it's almost like the heroine's journey, trying to find whatever. And it's like this, then it's this, and then it's this. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. You're like going through everything, and it's like you're finding the truth in it, I guess, aren't you? Yeah. But then you're also finding there's limitations to this, and there's challenges with it, and what are they? So that's a good way of putting it, for sure.
Another thing I just love is that we always hear today that you need to be your own guru, and that it's really nobody else can. It's really inside of you. You have to find that, but you have these different teachers or different whatever that you go and you can learn from. But at the end of the day, it's really about what's inside of you and what resonates with you. And so you are a wonderful demonstration of exploring and, seeing new things and checking things out on your search, but you're only going to do that which resonates with you. And when that resonates with you, now you're bringing that into your life and you share that with others. It's a beautiful demonstration of your whole life.
Thank you.
Doing that.
That was definitely my journey up till the end point so far. Absolutely. It was all about that. For sure.
There's another person that I want you to tell us about, and it was this iconographer. I didn't even know what the word was when you first told me what it was. So I want you to tell us a little bit how you got in connection with that person and what that was for you.
So when I was in that chapel that day where I had this amazing awakening, I want to call it experience,
the Magdalene Chapel in Glastonbury.
Yes, when I got up, there was a woman standing at the door, and she'd seen me in there. I was completely alone, and she said, "I don't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. I just happened to see you here, and I think you need to go and speak to John." Now, imagine I've just silently prayed to God to take my life over, and I've silently told him I'll say yes to whatever you want. And immediately after, a woman's appeared at the door saying, "You need to see John." So I'm like, yes, I'll go and see whoever you want. So it was a really amazing experience. And John was an iconographer, so a painter of icons of saints and biblical characters. And he was down at the almshouses, and I walked into this room. There's this little elderly man, sitting there working away, and these amazing, beautiful icons are on the wall. And I had such a feeling, or an experience, I want to say, of the truth of those icons. I felt like they were windows. They weren't just pictures, they were windows. And I felt that the saints and Jesus and Mary and all these beings from these were coming out of these windows towards me. And I cried. Yeah. I cried with the emotion and the realization of that. Wow. And John started speaking to me. He also got really tearful and asked me to study with him. So actually, after I had this experience, I studied with him for a little while. And it was an amazing experience. He told me all these biblical stories of the saints as well. And he took me to lots of church towers to see the bell ringers that he was part of, and to actually climb up the steeples and touch the bells and, see all the prayers that are engraved into church bells. I didn't know they had prayers. Yeah, they've all got prayers written in them. I didn't know that either. but I could see he was kind of trying to veer me towards some sort of Christianity. And I was really, I was very grateful, and I loved the stories and I loved the analogies and the parables, but I had no interest in going down that road. So it was an amazing experience,
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's wonderful. Well, so then there's kind of been like another side of the journey for you as well. So, you kind of had this whole like dark night of the soul that, took your world apart, your external world apart and all that, your physical body, your mental health, even everything, it was just like it crashed, and you built that back up again, and all these other different practices. It was another journey. But then there was a time when there was sort of like another dark night of the quote soul, but this time it was really about not that external stuff, but it was an internal war. Before it was you and outside like this. Now it's like you and inside you, like back and forth with what your soul was. So tell us a little bit about that journey, because it gets a little deeper.
Yes. So sort of a few years back now, I was experiencing some major challenges in the outside world still. But not in every area, so it's a little bit different, not the same as what happened before. And I started to, during that time, have a realization. There's these repeating patterns going on in my life, and I've done every therapy imaginable about these things, but it seems to be the same kind of thing that shows up. And I had this awareness that it wasn't really the people that were being the instigation of this problem. It was more that there's one energy that is influencing people in the world that is causing this kind of behavior. And I came to the realization, this is completely alone. I really want to stress that this is no teaching. I wasn't reading or studying, and that's why it was very profound. This happened in a very isolated way. I became really aware that evil existed. And, that for me was very hard pill to swallow. I believed in oneness. I believed in shadow and light. I believed completely that there was no such thing as evil at all, that actually it was just, ignorance and levels of consciousness, and that people awoke, it was all about their personal awakening. But it became so clear to me at this time that I had been very mistaken on that front. And that was such a shock to digest. And I then became aware, not aware, I want to say I questioned then, well, if evil exists, maybe the other things that are the opposite of evil must also have truth to them in the same way.
Yeah.
So this marinated with me for a while. And what I became aware of, I was studying lots of different things. I was actually doing Shaolin Qigong at this time as well. And there was two major changing points. One was that I realized that even though my outward life and my work and my practice was all about love, it was all about healing, it was all about these areas of life that were very true to me. Don't get me wrong, they were very real and true to me. I felt my integrity and inner world was slowly corrupting away. Now, no one could have really majorly pointed at me and said that this was happening. As you said quite rightly, it was internal. And I started to realize that my moral boundaries, my moral values, all of these things that were once intact were eroding and eroding and eroding. And I was really beginning to realize something's going on here in my soul. I am crossing lines in my soul that I never thought.
Give us an example or two of that eroding of moral principles that you come to realize, if you don't mind sharing a little bit of that? I think it's really important because people really get this then.
Yeah, I mean, it is very personal. So I'll try not to keep it, too much in that way. But I would say, some things that I noticed, for instance, was, I did have anger and bitterness towards people, and I wasn't acknowledging it. I just felt that I was a kind, reasonable person, and that I didn't have these things going on. But it started to surface up, and I realized that I did have these, I did have resentment. I didn't always wish people well. And I started to, actually, this is something we didn't speak about before, but I started to think, I need to purify my intentions, because I'm not always sure my intentions are actually as good as I've convinced myself they are. And relationship wise, you know, I had an idea of the kind of relationship that I would always want, but I was just getting further and further away from that morally. You know, I was going into a relationship wilderness at this point, of boundarylessness, and thinking that it was enlightened, thinking that that was actually being a much more conscious person in a relationship, but realizing that no, I'm traversing into some very dangerous waters here. So things like that would be a good example.
It's almost like oneness, the concept of oneness, where there's just, it's boundaryless, and you just are, and the isness was really crossing over into what you held to be morally okay inside innately.
Yes.
So that was, you know, you've got to explore that, you know, it's like, no, that's not okay. That is not what, you know, for you, the real oneness is about, you know, but that's another learning, you know, it's another edge you had to go and explore and to decide that's not okay with me.
It wasn't okay. And I think the other interesting thing is it was so confusing to create boundaries. It was so confusing because once you've opened up, and this is it, you've opened up to this idea of anything goes. And I was teaching retreats at that point, you know, women's wildness, and, you know, all about freeing the divine feminine and freeing ourselves from these patternings. So my work was all about letting go of those things. And, you know, I had worked on boundaries like you wouldn't believe, you know, don't think I hadn't done anything about it. I had done eons of work around boundaries and therapies and stuff, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter what I did. There was an internal eroding. And that's what I want to say. It was a subtle, it's not like overnight. And I started to say, where's my integrity in all of this? Where is my integrity and where's my morality in all of this? And that then escalated.
Yeah. Such a journey. There's one other place that I would like to explore that becomes a little bit deeper as well, if you're willing to go there with me.
Yeah.
And so it was really about, and I'm bringing this up because I just know in my journey, I have come across several people that have had this experience. And, you know, it's still like, what do I do with that? You know, how do I deal with it? What do I do with it? Why is it happening and stuff? And so I want to talk a little bit about that. And that really has to do with, you know, like the darker energies that were also starting to exist and get worse and worse and worse in your experience. Like, talk a little bit about some of the personal, you know, individuals that were coming into your life, and also some of the, I want to call it psychic phenomena that was also coming into your life that was, you know, not good for you.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I know it's a bit far out for some people sometimes to hear, but, you know, it is a reality. So back in 2010, 2011, you know, I'd always been intuitive. I'd always seen things since I was very young. You know, that in itself, phenomena was not a new thing to me, let's say. But during that time, especially when I was first getting into energy healing and all of these other things, through some experiences, I had some absolutely horrific experiences of entities, of things I had no idea existed. I was living in fear at one point of the things that I was seeing, and, you know, real psychic attack. Now, I've had sleep paralysis when I was young, but it really went up to a new level, you know, not just getting pulled out of the bed by my ankles, but actually getting pulled out of my body, which is a very terrifying experience. And I want to say at this point, because I think it's quite important, that my fear just turned into nonchalance, because it actually happened so much that I got used to it, and I got unafraid of it in the end. I used to just go, you know, again, you know, is that the best you can do? And because I was working with, you know, energy clearing, I was working with this phenomena for people as well. I was helping clear it. That in a way it became quite normal for me to deal with, but it definitely wasn't right. And I really wasn't sort of reading just how bad it was. I always had reasonings, which was, you know, well, I do this kind of work and sometimes I might take on something for someone, or I'm in that house because sometimes that would happen. I'd go to a new house, visit someone, and all this stuff would kick off. So, and then I'd clear it and it'd all go away. So I just felt it was like doing the laundry. It was like a manageable thing. But on the personal front, on the, you know, not invisible entities realm, if you like, in the human realm, I was experiencing just horrendous attack from people, like really bad in my life, different forms of attack and abuse that was escalating. And it took me a long time to figure out that, you know, or to be shown really that these were related, that this phenomena also was related. And it was just coming now through people.
So even to the place, and you don't have to go into this, where you had been being stalked by somebody, and how much that really had disturbed your life as well.
Absolutely.
So in the midst of all of that, then there came a time when, you know, just in this, I don't know what to do again, you know, the same kind of thing as when you said, take the wheel, you know, it's sort of like,
yes.
you're just like, what am I doing now? And you called out God, you called to God, or you called to Jesus. What was that about? And you realized that kind of helped deal with that energy. Tell us a little more detail about that.
So when I had these really bad attacks back in sort of 2011, I tried absolutely everything to get rid of it. I had every healer on the case you can imagine. I had everyone trying to help me, and, you know, clearings, you name it. And all my tools weren't working. You know, I was calling upon different deities. I was very into Buddhism, as I said. So I was calling on all these different Buddhist deities, mantras, chants, you know, space clearing, whatever. But the only thing that stopped it was the name of Jesus. And I feel really overwhelmed saying that. And I didn't know why it was stopping it. You know, it's a bit like being a kid and just not understanding, you know. Yeah. So I knew from that point on there was power in his name, but I didn't want to know why. And I didn't understand why. Mm-hmm. And I did have an amazing experience in 2017 where he really did show me the truth of who he was. And he really did show me something very beautiful that I may, could I share it? Would that be okay?
Absolutely. So, absolutely.
In 2017, when I was in the middle of some of these very difficult situations that I'm talking about, I was heartbroken. I went through a severe betrayal, like professional and personal betrayal, that felt like it was going to kill me. It was that seismic. And I was absolutely broken in that point again as well. And I went to Buckfast Abbey, which is a beautiful abbey in Devon. And at the end of the abbey is a room that is a private chapel, and you're asked to be quiet when you go in there. And there is a gigantic window. Well, it's not a window. The whole wall is actually a beautiful stained glass of Jesus with his arms out like this. And it's really mind-blowing to see. And I'd always loved that room. Again, I'm not religious. I'm just going in there because I like these things and I'm fascinated. I like religious art and I like the ideas of it, but not it, right? So I went in there that day, and as soon as I sat down there, it was empty, unusually. And I could not stop crying. Suddenly, this wave of heartache and grief came out of me, and I was completely destroyed. And my whole body was crying. You know, that kind of snotty, terrible crying that you can't stop. And
the ugly cry.
The ugly cry, like ugly cry on steroids. It was so overwhelming. And these two monks came in, you know, to get everything ready for mass. And the back of my head, I was going, please, Joe, just shut up, you know, just stop. It's so embarrassing. And I couldn't, you know, I just couldn't do it. So, and they were, you know, brilliant. They've probably seen it a million times, but off they went. And in this agony of I just couldn't understand what was going on, and the rejection and the abandonment and the betrayal. It was just so deep. And I'm looking at this window, and of course I'd seen it many times, and I thought it was Jesus, you know, putting his arms out to welcome you, you know, and obviously it's the position of the cross, but I really saw it as, you know, more welcoming. Yeah. And in that moment, he stepped out from the glass. He came out from the glass, And he showed me that he was standing between me and this other person that had really, hurt me on such a dramatic level. And he showed me, I am the reason this person is rejecting you and pushing you away. I am the reason, because I won't allow it. I won't allow it. I won't allow you to be with them. And what you're experiencing is me protecting you.
Wow. Wow.
And my crying, just like a tap, just went poof. And I was in absolute shock. And I knew it was true. I knew with absolutely every fiber of my being that was true. And I suddenly went from the worst agony in my life to the biggest awe and gratitude. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for protecting me from this thing I really thought was right for me, and it's been destroying me. And as I left that day, there was a scripture, and I really can't remember which scripture it is now, but I really must look at it. But there was a scripture on the door, and it basically said, it's along the lines of, place me above no others. Like, you must put me above all others. And when I read it, I thought, Jesus is telling me I've got to put him above everyone and everything. So I can't put a man or a job or all these things that I think are important above him. And I knew that was true. And I'm a bit, it's embarrassing to admit this, because in that moment, I knew it was true. It's like the words flew off that banner and went in. But I continued to ignore it.
Oh, well, you know what? I love the things that you're telling about from the standpoint of the knowingness inside of you. There's just a knowingness, and there's been several times in your life when there is just this knowingness to be true. And the other thing is that, just like the iconographer, I can't even remember that name, but what they were painting and all these icons and stuff, they became alive. So they were more than just like this picture of the stained glass of Jesus. It became alive. So it's more than just something that's tangible. No, it's alive. And that's when things are, it resonates with you, and you knew that was really true. That is so beautiful. Thank you. You had not shared that story with me before.
Had I not? Oh, wow.
Not the detail of that story.
Right.
I mean, on the circumference, but no, we needed the details. See, it's the details and the journey and the emotions of it that resonates with us. It's just beautiful. So then we're kind of going to go along with, you are now kind of, I know that this was like a few years before, but eventually it got to be where you're thinking, okay, there's this much power in this name, and it can stop this energies, and it can protect me. And you know that, even though you don't really want anything to do with it, but you're glad they're there. But like, I'm not going down that route because it's not what my truth is for me, kind of thing.
That's it.
It's like, then you decided, I guess I need to check this out, or whatever. So you started on this search, and you started to study, and tell us a little bit more now about that, what that journey was. And particularly when you started to look for, well, maybe I will find a church, but it's not going to be the standard traditional church, because I don't want that. So tell us about that.
Okay. So in short, it was last year, I was doing a lot of work with soul ties. And that really does affect people on a trauma level and so forth. And I'd worked with sort of cutting of the ties, but I was realizing that soul ties, especially, when we get physically involved with people, has long lasting impressions. And I was seeing that more and more in my work, and I'd experienced it in my own life, and the phenomena that can come with that. So I was looking for ways to sort of work with it. And I found this pastor online. And, it's the last person I thought I'd be listening to be honest. But he was doing this soul tie work and these prayers. And it was amazing. It really worked. I thought, wow, something's really changing in my life. And I think I told you this, but, I took the prayers obviously involved Jesus, and I was taking Jesus out of it and just saying all the other stuff that was around it. And it wasn't really working as well. And then I had to put him back in, and then woof, So I was like, okay, I can't get away with excluding Jesus and just using the technique that my sneaky workaround is not working. And I was working with clients with this as well. I had a lot of clients at the time that were having a lot of phenomena issues through their own experiences. And I was using these prayers with them, and I was using the name of Jesus with them, and things were really shifting. And I thought, okay, Lord, whoever you really are, Jesus, because I don't really know who you are. I've never been able to accept the gospel. I've never been able to accept the story of who Jesus was, but I thought I've got to find out now. And I was like, so I did pray. I did say, I who really are you, Jesus? And I bought a Bible online, something I thought I would not be doing. And I bought one with a plain cover so that my then partner couldn't see me reading it, because I thought he's going to really judge me. And he wasn't going to judge me, but that's how much I was reticent about it all.
Yeah.
And I started to read the word on my own, and I started to cry. And things were jumping out of there, and I was realizing the truth of a lot of this. And there was a lot leading up to it. But, the most important thing is I picked that book up, having spent years avoiding it or cherry picking, nice little lines that fitted in with my truth, if you like. So that started to happen, and I started to pray, and and this is interesting, but at this point I was setting up for work one day, and I really was doubting the morality of my work. And a lot of people say that sounds very harsh and a bit religious, but this was before I even came to the Lord. I basically already felt there was something, morally not right about my work. And I didn't know what it was, though. It was just a feeling. And one day, after I'd been praying to Jesus and doing these prayers, I was setting up my tools for my work, and I had a lot of tools for it. And I heard this beautiful, gentle voice. It was so, gentle. It was nothing authoritative, it was over my left side, and it was the loveliest presence. I didn't know what it was, but it just said, in a month, you will put your tools down for good. And I went, yes. And I knew it was right. It was like, yeah, that's right. That is what I need to do. And about a week after this, I decided I better find a church. I didn't know what church was like. I'd never been as a willing attendee ever. So I searched and searched and searched for something that looked like it would accept a tattoo ex-witch, pagan, whatever, musician, because I'm thinking they're going to throw me out as soon as I get in the door. And I really was that scared, and I really was that reticent. And I'm on Google Maps, and eventually about an hour and just over an hour away from me, I see this tiny, tiny dot on Google Maps, and I blow it up, and it's a room full of people, and they look really cool. They look really normal. There's a lot of people younger than me in there as well. And I thought, okay, I'll go there. So should I continue to say what happened?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that Sunday, I get in the car and I go down there, and I am nervous. I'm not going to lie about that. I was nervous, and I thought this could be an absolute disaster for someone like me. This could be, I don't know what I thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to judge me or indoctrinate me, or try and
shut the door,
make me a member like a cult or something. I don't know. Yeah, shut the door and lock me in. So I went in, and I sat in the corner. I'm hiding out of the way, and everyone's very friendly. People really took their time to come over and say hello, and I think, God, these people are so lovely, and there's so much warmth, and there was no. This was so interesting. There was no judgment at all. It was so the opposite of what I thought I was going to be experiencing. So I sat down, and the worship music began. And as soon as the worship music began, and it was beautiful biblical words in the songs of the worship music, I just started to cry. I just knew this was the truth. And it was hitting me. And it was like my heart was being shattered open. It was like something, I would say something on the outside of my heart, I would say, was being broken off, as if there was like a clay around a mold around my heart. And it was just breaking it off. And I was just sobbing. And, and then, I'm trying to compose myself because I'm quite embarrassed. I'm not expecting this to happen. I'm thinking I'm just going to go in there and judge this for myself and sneak home. I'm not expecting this. And then the pastor gets up to talk. And who is the pastor? It's my bioenergy teacher from 15 years ago.
Full circle moment here.
Full circle moment. I was just sitting there going, what in the world is going on? So that day was a life-changing day for me, because it was like an acceleration of understanding. And he came over. We had such a good laugh about it. And I said, your prayer only took 15 years to take effect, to get here, and I knew it was the truth. I didn't, and I want to say this, I didn't intellectually understand the truth, because there's far too much in the gospel to intellectually understand. My heart recognized it as the truth. That's the best way of putting it.
Totally.
And they prayed over me. I gave my life to Jesus there with him and with one of the pastor's wives. And I had the most incredible experience that I'd never had before, which is I felt like, as they were praying over me, as I was saying, I accept you, Lord Jesus, as my savior. I accept my need of a savior, because that was another thing.
Right.
I never understood. No, not at all. So that was a big thing to realize. And as that happened, I felt this warm oil kind of go. It was like someone dripped this warm oil on my head, and it was the most beautiful feeling. It was like honey and nectar. It felt so full of nutrients, is the best way of putting it. And it went all the way over me, and I could feel it going down my body. And I felt in that moment, like all my chakras and everything I've been messing with over the years, it was like they all closed and sealed up. And it was as if I had been sealed and marked as safe. Now, at the time, I did not know what that meant. And I remember getting in my car after and thinking, I'm safe. And it was some months later when I read in the Bible that it actually says that. It says, I will seal you. When you come to me, I will actually seal you, and I will make you safe. So that was mind-blowing, because everything that I experienced was actually already in scripture, and I didn't
And you
know.
didn't know that intellectually. It came to you embodiment-wise before you even knew that it exists. Yeah, totally. That is so beautiful. That is just so beautiful. Oh, yeah. So we're getting a little bit pressed for time, so I'm going to speed us along a little bit here.
Yes, sure.
But I want you to, I guess one of the things that I want to make sure that, our audience really understands is that whole warm oil stuff coming over. It was almost like sealing up all the places from your exploration of oneness and openness that had opened up for you, that had just kind of like sealed it and closed it for you. And the safety that you felt from that perspective. I want to make sure that everybody understands that piece of it.
That's very poignant. And absolutely. It was like all that stuff I've been opening into and it was all sealed up, and I was safe from.
Yeah, you felt safe for the first time in many years.
I think probably the first time in my life, spiritually.
Totally. So when you think about this journey, there's like 2 or 3 things that what were the most valuable things that you learned that just kind of span the whole thing? Tell us a couple of those.
I think the most valuable thing I learned, really looking back, I mean, I'm going to say like seeking, sacrifice, and surrender. Now, I don't know where that's come from, because I've just only thought of that today, in the moment that you've asked me. But I would say that those are the 3 things, is that seeking is a positive thing. Never to give up seeking in a way, because, life is not a static situation. It's a growing. And also there are sacrifices to that seeking. When I came to the Lord, I gave up my business. It was completely thriving, and I gave it up with no safety net. I didn't have any savings. I don't come from a wealthy family. I didn't have anyone to support me. So that was a massive leap of faith. And that comes back to the third one, which is surrender.
Yeah.
So surrendering your unknowing, or surrendering what is holding you back from finding more. But sometimes we don't want to find more, because we know if we do, and I don't know, you've probably experienced this in your own journey, but there are points on the path where there's something more, but you're a bit afraid to go there, because you might have to sacrifice something, and you might have to surrender to find out what it is. So those were my real learnings.
Totally true. You have to be willing to let go, to let something else in, and there's fear and trepidation about that, because you don't know what that's going to mean. Yeah.
Yes.
And the other thing I want to make sure that you bring up is that you realize that your whole searching and your journey, that it was always there. It was always there. You just couldn't see it. It's kind of like right in front of you, but it's like you just can't see it. And that's true probably for everybody. Like the answer is probably only it's within our space, like a tiny. We don't get it.
Yes, that's brilliant. I mean, there's two things there. One is that when I came to Christ, I realized he'd been actually chasing me all my life. And I was absolutely floored with humility by that, because I look back and I could see every moment in time since I was a child.
Yeah.
I could see every moment in time where he'd gone, Joe, are you coming with me now? Are you coming with me now? Yeah. And I'm very stubborn. I'm very rebellious. So, it took 45 years to get me there. Thank him that he did. I'm sure he had a reason for taking that time.
Yeah.
But the second part of it was about it being there all along.
Yeah.
Is that's another thing, isn't it? In nature, my dad always used to say that the cure to what you're going through is often growing on your doorstep. So just like the dock leaf grows next to the stinger nettle, when you sting yourself on a nettle, the dock leaf is there to cure it. And I think in spiritual life, that's the same. It's probably the nearest thing to you. If you're willing to drill as deep as you can go into it, that is probably going to be the answer.
Find your answer. Those are beautiful. So beautiful. So, tell us a little bit on what your journey looks like now, from both your teachings perspective, but also your musical career. So give us a couple sentences or two about what that is.
So from a music perspective, I'm going on tour, doing a show called the Shadow Navigation Show. And that's going to be stories and songs that I've written mainly. There will be some worship music thrown in there at the end. But it's also a journey. In fact, it covers a lot of this in a way, because it's a journey of different folklore stories that are healing with music and visuals as well. So I'm taking that on tour in England, Scotland, Ireland in October and November. And my music is evolving from where I am now. I only got baptized in May. It's already been life-changing. So that has really changed everything. And from a therapy perspective, I will be going back to therapy in the future, but from this perspective. And I will be going back to femininity and what femininity really looks like from a biblical perspective, because I've found that to be extremely solidifying. And it's been a revelation to me to learn that, and it's changed things in such a beautiful way in my own life.
It's so great. And one of the things that I also want to highlight to the audience is that, and you didn't talk about it here, but you've talked about it with me before, is that, when you decide, okay, I'm going to give it up, I'm going to give up whatever you do, whatever, even music, you were willing to give that up. And so then, like over the little bit of time that was percolating along, all of a sudden tell us what you got awarded for music.
So basically, I said to the Lord, have it all. It's all yours now. And that's an interesting one. I want to say that as well. I'd been following my heart up to this point, but I actually gave my heart to the Lord, and now I follow him. And that's a very big difference as well. But at that point, I was like, you can have it all. And, I love music more than anything, but I was like, you can still have that if it's not right for me. I gave up my work. I had enough money to live on for a month. I was literally about to go that day to apply to the garden centre for work. And ding, in my inbox, I got awarded a 3-year music grant. So I then knew the Lord was telling me, I want you to stay in music.
Oh,
So that
so
was amazing.
fabulous. So fabulous.
Yeah, it was
This
so
has
amazing.
been such an incredible journey to walk with you. Thank you so much for sharing it with us on what that really was, as you have found, progressively, what your answers are and where you really do feel free, where you do feel safe. And it's kind of been a full circle moment in your journey. And,
Yes.
it's like everybody has to do their journey, because if you had not done that journey, you wouldn't know everything you know by what journey you took.
Yes.
And therefore you wouldn't have nearly as much wisdom, insight, gold, I call it, to bring out to the world in your teaching that you're going to be doing next. So that's beautiful. Thank you so much for the graciousness that you shared that with us.
Thank you so much for asking me, and also for just such an amazing, generous invite to talk about this,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm really, I'm really humbled that you'd asked, because I know it can be controversial at times, but it's been just so beautiful to be able to share it with you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Those of us who are in the States probably aren't as aware of all your touring and stuff like that.
Yes.
But we will stay in touch with what that looks like. And I'm sure those in Europe, will be really aware of your tour and all the things that are happening. So
thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again so much. And the best to you and your touring and all the stuff that you're doing going forward. Blessings.
Thank you so much. Bless you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.